Greetings, everyone. My name is Lauren Ashley Thomas, and today I will be presenting for you all Gentrification in Nashville, Future Scenarios and Key Impacting Factors. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge one pretty overarching important fact, and that is being that I am still very early on within my project. So my mentor is Mr. Nathan Perry, and we're very much in the crude building, planning out strategic phase of the project. So of course, everything within the guises and relations of this project is pretty overarching, broad, not really focused. But as I'm closer to my term of completion and submission, that being the November and December time of 2024. So this year, all of my focuses and points will be more concise and more organized. So first, moving into it, in pursuing my project, I wanted to investigate one main question, and that being, how does Nashville's change in population, estate zoning, housing prices, how does all of that affect the city's objective livability? So that more so relates to me as a local Nashvilleian. My family has been here for at least 5 generations, as well as future generations. How can we accurately gauge whether the future of Nashville in general is really supportive for us? So before we begin properly, I would like to acknowledge the resources and sources I did use to investigate and explore for my research. So number one is our local state census, which is released every decade. Number two is local university papers, primarily belonging to Vanderbilt University and UTK. So next is documentation journals. So those of which who have actually gone out into the community, explored the factors and viewable nature of gentrification, their opinions and judgments on that matter. And last but not least is local news and publishing, just broadcasting just the effects of gentrification and the change the city has seen overall. So moving into it properly, Nashville population percentage increases. So the year spanning from 2013 to 2024. So overall, the trend is fairly general, slight increase between the years 2013 to 2018, with more of a unique differing change up, down between 2019 and 2024. Now, again, I'm not really going to explore the reasons as to why these statistics look the way they do, since, of course, again, this is more a broad general overview of the current stance of Nashville and its population, gentrification, et cetera, et cetera. But we can agree and see that the population numbers of 2024 is, of course, larger when compared to 2023, excuse me, 2013. So looking into it more specifically, there is a 10.88% increase. So this number is quite important since Nashville is currently undergoing its earlier or at least middle stages of gentrification, but it's unique in that the population increase from the past decade, so 10 years, doesn't really warrant as much. So we're seeing the strains and pressures of large amounts of gentrification, even though our population hasn't really increased by much. So moving into it, of course, Tennessee is a very, very big state. So it is important to see as the influx and increase of population, where are these numbers being concentrated into? So in terms of states, provinces, locations, locality, et cetera. So Knoxville, Memphis, and Nashville currently holds most of the state's population concentration. So I find that unique seeing as it only makes up 50% of the state cities, so 3 out of 503 cities, yet it makes up 21% of the state's overall population. So looking at Nashville specifically, as it currently holds almost 700,000 people. So when comparing residents moving into the state boundary lines in 2022, 61% were belonging to just other states, but the top five states that have brought more residents to Nashville are, of course, Florida, California, Georgia, Texas, Illinois. So moving, excuse me, continuing, I thought it would be up to my due diligence to, look into these states' partisan leans. So how do they fare as it pertains to traditional American like political scene. So whether they lean more so right or blue, Democrat, Republican. So within the urbanized city lines of Nashville, of course, it's our state's capital. So they lean more so towards the Democratic line in general. But I find it unique to see that the changes into it being more so on the blue side instead of red, as we are Tennessee, of course, more of a red conservative state. All of these changes are coming from primarily red states. So Florida, Georgia, Texas, very much red states. So these political changes of more so of like a blue Republican based Nashville being kind of compared and mixed and conflated to the traditional red and Republican scene of Tennessee. It's making kind of a more mottled or purple culture. So of course, we're not necessarily mainly and primarily conservative or Republican anymore. So continuing into county zoning standards as it relates to the residential spectrum. So Davidson County is typically associated with central the state central, so that does maybe include Nashville. So we're looking at single family units, 2 units, 3+ units, so like apartments, duplexes, triplexes, as well as ADUs, which are more independent and detached family living areas with Williamson County, Maury County, Rutherford, Wilson, Sumner. So looking at it directly, of course, Nashville fares pretty decently, but on the lower spectrum as it pertains to single individual family houses, but more multiples or estate zoning properties that support multiple and like larger influxes of families. They do have like they outsource. They are on the increase. They excuse me, they're more common in Nashville, basically. So seeing that, it's important to take a look at the housing affordability changes. So Nashville, as it stands, does support residential areas that support more than one family, but that may be quite insufficient and unsupporting for the general basis of like Nashville and the state's original like local populations. So looking at this map, mapping housing affordability changes to the beginning of the map, so 2024 as well as the end to 2020 to 2024, Nashville was outpacing Tennessee's average median sale price since its beginning, so since the graph's conception. And so looking at the median sales price in the status quo of $400,000, it only really shows and proves that the current stance of Nashville housing in residential areas, pricing accessibility, it's quite inaccessible for most Nashvillians, seeing as most of us only earn about $50,000 to $70,000. So not a lot of people can afford to live in central Nashville. So next, I wanted to take a look at the direct impacts of such a unique population concentration and altering political scene, changes to land zoning, and its effectual steep housing prices. So number one is, of course, the dreaded case of urban renewal and redlining, which is most directly associated to gentrification. So, of course, many people may have their own subjective and individualized opinions as to what that means directly, but we can see it taking place in the next following few examples. So number one is old places looking new. A lot of the times, Nashville-based zoning companies or residential pursuing companies want to make traditional, older, usually affordable lower income spaces look new, more attractive to people on like a higher economic strata or basis, or those from simply out of state. So that, of course, pushes the local populations and local residents out, whether that be into cheaper Tennessean cities surrounding Nashville or out of the state in general. Next is poor prospects for the local community. So in general, that can just mean like if people are currently living there, they may not receive as much of the funding since most of Tennessee's and Nashville's focus and basis and expanses and just economic focus is going to the more popular area that's going to bring in more economic incentive, that's going to bring in more popularity between other people that do provide the city more in terms of economics. And last but not least is affordability for locals. If someone is currently living in a space that's being pursued by gentrificative forces, they may find that their area that may have housed them for maybe a generation or two that they've lived for their entire lives, it's simply unaffordable at that point. So it can't really support their needs anymore, whether that be for rent or just the pricing of living, food, basic necessities. So moving onward is aggressivity. So in general, and this is just a farce equation example, but a changing demographic, whether it be population and where these people are from, or even on the political spectrum, but added to a denser city limit and also as well as housing insecurities has led to more additional influxing of cases pertaining to microaggressions and macroaggressions. So whether it may be on the scene of like one's political preference or maybe their gender, their race, religion, there are, you know, a lot of newer cases of people having contingencies and conflicts on that regard. So last but not least, I wanted to take a look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs to kind of see how Nashville will relate to that regard. So just in general, the hierarchy of needs is just pinpointing what one would need to feel secure and feel satisfied in their community and living space. So of course, number one is psychological, two is safety, three is belongingness and love. Those are typically associated with needs that one needs to just survive as a singular healthy human being. But four and five is typically associated with the needs one needs to feel when they want to maybe expand or achieve a new step in their lives or really just see some type of internal betterment within themselves. So I can properly say that through my tenure of exploration investigation, albeit really short, Nashville does indeed cover one to three. So the basic needs of survival. So it's really good and sustainable in that it does support enclaves, people who share more similar preferences or ideologies or likes, they can kind of band together and help to support each other. But whereas the more hierarchy, um, like the needs kind of more so at the top, so they're more depending, they're more basically needs to go into it for people to feel like they've achieved these needs. So esteem and self-actualization. Nashville probably really isn't that good in supporting these factors as when it like pertains to like political nature, livability. It's going to be a lot more difficult for someone to really apply themselves and move out of their comfort zone or their place of local livability, since it's more difficult to get out into the more economically prime centers that have like, excuse me, higher caliber and grading of, say, academic prospects or maybe jobs. So, in conclusion, in answering the question, how does Nashville's change in population, estate zoning, and housing, how does all of that go into the effectual nature of its objective livability? So, I can confidently say that due to an influx of new residents, a more unique political scene, steep changes to housing and livability accessibility, as well as the combined and associated effects of as much, modern day Nashville may not be at the peak of its livability caliber. So, that means for citizens like me, as well as future generations that do choose to live in Nashville, may not be, as it stands, the best choice of living. So I hope you guys maybe learned at least something or found this project engaging or at least interesting. So I'd like to thank you all for listening. Bye.